Hello, and welcome to this re-recording of a webinar on how to craft and edit your work for impact. I'm Christina Quinn, the Director of CSU Rights. We're in the Office of the Vice President for Research here at Colorado State University, and we're going to talk about good writing, impactful publication, developing your own writing style, making your writing quotable and sticky. Sticky's a good thing here, and editing with or without AI. Good research and scholarly writing, we kind of know what it is when we see it. There are certain characteristics that it has, however. It is clear, it is precise, it is usually concise so that there's not a lot of extra words kind of getting in our way. It's formal, unbiased, original thinking, right? Proven or evidence-based, something that we can build off of that's new, that it's coherent, it's logical, and it's correct. All of those things are good qualities. And yet, when we talk about them, those qualities, they feel kind of deadening. And it's one of the ways that if we are hyper focused on those, it can keep us from getting to the connection to our readers and to be able to write with a style that brings about all of those qualities. But yeah, it's not the place where we really want to be focusing all the time. It's just important for us to know what they are. And same thing with impactful publication. We can think about the qualitative and quantitative elements of those writings, but I think in particular, impact metrics, citations, journal impact factor, all of those may be choices that we make and things that we want to watch to have some kind of measure, but they're not the real measures of the quality of the work that we do. Quality of the work that we do and the quality of the impact that it has overall will take some time, and it usually extends beyond citations. It extends beyond the value of a journal impact factor for our career advancement. The real world impact of our writing is in that we change how a field thinks, perhaps, that we change some policy, we have some health kind of influence or social economic status impacts, that our work has utility to advance the work of others. And that is one of the keys of having good, quotable, impactful work, that it's recognized by other researchers and within the scholarly community, and that we make some lasting contributions ultimately to our field. Quotable research and scholarship has some of those very same qualities as good writing, right? It's clear, it's concise, it's relevant, it's meaningful, it's memorable. We're picking up on all of those kind of things, those subconsciously, I would say. We just pick up on them, and we're picking up writing that is to the point. It's related to what we're talking about. It can be built upon. And so we want to make sure that the writing that we're giving to others can do something very similar. So when we're doing our own reading of other people's writing and we're pulling our quotations, we're looking to see what makes it good writing or helpful for us. It'd be good for us to then think about like, well, how is that structured? Why am I pulling from here? Why is it that how is it that I see that it's relevant to my work? How am I using it to contextualize or create a bridge between what they've said, what I say, and what people in the future will say? And what is the quality of that writing? So it's helpful for you to kind of step back and take a look at that style, the writing style of it, because your writing style is not completely your own. It is not unique to you as much as we might think it is. It comes from, the field itself. We are not born knowing this language. It is constructed. It is not innate. It is not universal. It is, again, field specific. It will change over time. There are agreed upon structures and ideas that you will build upon in your field. It is a craft and a process of how it is that you learn to put this together. It is highly specialized. It will require that you make decisions about how you draft and how you edit and where you include something or you take it out. That will eventually demonstrate your style. There, you will have some constraints on your expression in order to create some level of consistency in your own style so your work is recognizable by others and recognizably you. And you will also be using some style guides, which we will talk about in a moment. And sorry, it should have this auto-populate. But your style and your voice is made up of things like diction, chosen words, sentence structure, your tone, which is kind of your attitude. There's a number of ways that we could talk about tone, but it comes through in the warmth or the coolness or the word choices that you're making actually, and the figurative language. the metaphors, the similes, the examples that you're giving, or the comparisons that you're doing with your words. Her lips were roses is an example of a metaphor. And the fact that you would choose that particular metaphor to describe something suggests something about your writing and uh, should be related to the work that you're doing. But your style and writing will convey meaning to your readers. It's going to engage them specifically. It's going to align your work with the purpose of the document itself, your ideas, and it'll suit your field and profession. And so your writing style, again, is not entirely your own, but it's a way that you are kind of wielding the field, the genres, the constraints, the style guides, and other things of your field. Style guides don't tell you what your style is, but you must comply with style guides when you publish. So you will be publishing perhaps in a field that requires that you format in very particular ways, that you write within an IMRAD structure, introduction, methodology, findings, and discussion, right? So that you have a kind of structure to your writing that may not be required in other fields. My field in literary studies, we don't have those requirements, and it's a much more free for all in how it could be structured. And yet there's still some, guidelines and conventions on what's the best way to arrange certain types of information. And we'll talk about that more when we get to those logical arrangements later. The key is to be kind to your readers, your reviewers, and yourself by following those style guides because it helps everyone in your field follow what it is that you're saying ultimately. You can have any number of styles for any number of fields, right? But many of you will be working in something like APA or Chicago Manual Style or IEEE. So just make sure that you know what the style guide and manual is of your field because that will determine kind of how it is that you operate and work with your disciplinary discourse, which is the language of your field, how it is that you create meaning. And then something here, like you look at this example from the field of wildlife ecology and biology. This is a example from the USGS publication. And there's something very formalized to this, right? Very specific to what their field is and the reports and information that they're working with. They have structures for their tables and they have structures for their executive summary. So just pay attention to the language of your field, the style guides of your field, and then what it is that you're trying to say is how it is that you're going to wield your own style within that field. Disciplines have specialized norms and conventions that give you some rules for communication for specialized vocabulary, for example, the genres that you're going to be writing in, and then thinking about the ways that you're going to demonstrate meaning making for your finding, your argumentation, interpretation, and others. And that's what gives fields their shape. So there are these kind of disciplinary ways of knowing that have discourses, that then those discourses are created through certain types of representations that have different modes. And so there could be a type of formalism within your field. There are working practices, ways that you would put together images, pictures, right, diagrams, and then different types of words and imagery. So all of those come to work together in something of your formalized document that then has your own style that's holding all of those disciplinary ways of knowing and formal styles from your field together. Helen Sword has taken a look at academic style guides just to kind of see for different disciplines how that operates. And so it's kind of fun to just see from someone who's done the work to look at style guides. She looked at around 100 of them to see what fields are interested in what types of elements of style, for example. So clarity, coherence, and concision is across the board, right? If they allow and they encourage and something that they're working towards, or whether they're prohibiting or working, and it seems like very few are prohibiting clarity or concision, right? Sentence lengths, style of English, precision, action verbs, and telling a story. Those are all pretty highly rated and encouraged. And then personal pronouns or use of jargon and personal voice, all the way through engaging titles to a lesser degree. And those instances where you want to check and see like how engaging can I be with my titles. Chances are you kind of know that based on the reading that you're already doing in your field, whether you're working in a field that allows for you to be pretty creative with the titles that you're coming up with for your paper, or if you need to be much more to the point and descriptive only to the topic at hand, which can be highly specialized, right, within your field. Note with active verbs how often active verbs are encouraged or allowed, and that it looks like no. Field Guide was saying don't use active verbs. So active verbs are quite popular across the board, right? So if you think about where those are, and then look at for non-standard structures are encouraging you to play with language, right? Or engaging titles. Most of those are look like they're field specific. And here you can get a sense of the analyses that she did on, these are on 500 articles within the field, about 50 articles per discipline, and looking at whether they, how their inclusion of personal pronouns, a unique hybrid structure, engaging titles, um, engaging openings, for example, common or abstract nouns, this are right there within the sentences and usually at the beginning of a sentence, or they discussed or had used lots of be forms of verb, is, are, was, were, be, being, been. And you can see that there's just not one way in a field to construct information, discourse, stories, language, and tell what it is that you want to tell your readers about your research or your scholarship. There are some formalized ways, but that and looks like personal pronouns used across the board in most fields, perhaps history less for writers, but then there are some where unique or hybrid structures, not so much in medicine or in evolutionary biology, but most other fields. So you probably know a lot about these structures and what's given or considered good writing in your field versus what you shouldn't be doing in your field just by reading. And you'll get a sense of a lot of that and internalize and produce a lot of that that will become part of your style based on your reading. If you are in a field where you co-author, just note that style issues are often vexing for writers. If you are taking the lead on an article and then you get feedback from multiple authors, co-authors, for example, and making changes and recommendations, that is a place where we know from studies on collaborative writing that style issues wind up being some of the most challenging relationally for co-authors. And my recommendation would be to determine whether the recommended style changes are necessary for clarity, concision, precision, right, for accuracy and representation, or if it's something that where it just seems to be a preference. It could be if it's a preference, it might be related to style and description that has come before or is coming after so that there's a coherency in that section. So there are ways that you might want to say, oh yeah, this kind of makes sense that we would need to make these changes. If it seems like it's just a personal preference and style change on their part, you might then want to say, I appreciate this insight or this feedback, but I think for our purposes, for coherency or clarity or concision, that we should keep the style as it is. So just knowing about style changes and what's the difference between style and then content, for example, is helpful for you in making having those conversations in a productive and kind way with your colleagues. So what's your writing style and how does that fit with having conversations with your readers in particular? Well, your style is kind of you writing, but to others. How's that? You writing to yourself is probably something different. But as soon as you start to write to readers, you have a way that you want your information to be read and presented and to be understood. And so there's oftentimes a gap, however, between what you're writing and how it is that readers are picking it up. And that's in part because when you are writing, the textual decisions that you are making are based on things like word choice, sentence structure, arrangement of sentences, arrangement of paragraphs, arrangement of sections, titles, subtitles, notes, meaning endnotes or footnotes that you're including. And many of those will actually be subconscious decisions, maybe less so than notes, right? If you are making a decision to include a footnote, you're probably consciously determining that additional information needs to be added into a footnote to clarify something for a reader. But a lot of the word choice and sentence structures and kind of the arrangement of sentences and things, you'll do that on a subconscious level, particularly when you're drafting out. So those textual decisions are the ones that you make with you, the writer, in mind. But when you're a reader of that same text, you want to have things just be accurate and precise. You want the meanings to be clear. You want connections to be smooth and flow. You want the elaboration of ideas or to be just enough so that you understand, but not so much that you feel bogged down. You want ideas to be integrated well and quotations, right? Information from other places to be integrated well. You want some sort of context or guidance so that you know where you are within a text, what's coming, what has come before and what will come after should be kind of apparent by that flow. And then the context kind of behind the scenes, if there's anything that you need to know about who the person is who's writing it, if it's positionality or other things that's relevant. But notice that those two things are slightly different. The writer is looking at the construction of it, and the reader is looking at the consumption. So construction versus consumption, two different ways of working with the same text. So between that, that's your style. You can think about how it is that you're engaging with your readers and how it is that you want them to pick it up. It can help you kind of engage with that. Joshua Schimmel, at the very first line of his book on writing science, he says, as a scientist, you are a professional writer. This is quotable. I have used it now. I think 4 of my published articles have this line from Joshua Schimmel in it. I find it incredibly useful and helpful, in part because we often don't think of ourselves as writers if we are researchers or scientists. We could fill this out and make it more relevant for folks at Colorado State University because not everyone identifies as a scientist. Not everyone is, right? We have scholars, we have researchers, we have creative artists and others who publish. Basically, we have experts across the field, we have entrepreneurs and other people. So whatever it is that you identify with, right? At that point, if you're an expert in your field and you are writing for publication, you are a professional writer. Notice what happens to this passage when we fill it in with additional clarification. It becomes much less quotable. I think we do this a lot with our writing. We add in additional information that we believe is important for the context for readers to be able to pick it up. And then by creating that additional kind of accuracy and precision, perhaps accuracy for sure, that we make it so that it's perhaps less quotable. The context for Joshua Schimmel's writing science is that he's writing to scientists. So it makes sense that for him to just be short and pithy and to the point, as a scientist, you are a professional writer, it works. Consider those when you're looking to make your writing clear and precise, but also then quotable. What are those elements? And do you need to have all of the extra framing, or can you frame it separately or differently? This is about making your story sticky. Do you have a point or an idea that you want people to hang on to? Not every sentence in your writing will be sticky, by the way, but there are many ways to see if your story and what you're doing overall is going to be sticky. And you want to ask people, for how long do you want people to remember it after they've read it? There are some stories that are riveting, compelling, right? But as soon as people close them, they forget, right? And he calls that perfect airplane reading. But there are other stories that may stay with you for a while. Those would be the ones that you can pass down, right? That you can build civilizations on, he says. And so these are the ideas or the stories that you want to just be able to keep moving with, keep giving forward. And those are usually have some quality of stickiness, that meaning that they're simple, they're unexpected, they're concrete, they're credible, they're emotional, and that they're stories. They're something that can be told, they can be told. You can think about this as being something that's quotable in a segment. As a scientist, you are a professional writer, for example. It gives a context of identity, it gives a context of place, and it gives a context of being surprising as well, that kind of maybe emotional or kind of unexpected quality. We'll talk about more in a moment. And he's pulling these qualities of sticky from Heath and Heath when their studies and talking about what makes things, well, sticky. Those are conceptual frameworks. This is not actually from Heath and Heath. This is something that I've added in, but for us to kind of think about what would be quote sticky conceptual framing is maybe a scholarly idea expressed in a language that becomes so memorable and portable and explanatory that the phrase itself becomes culturally and academically influential. So it has those kind of ability to be portable, right? And to be quoted from and brought from one place to the next, to be built upon, right? From one scholar to another. That idea of simple is not about being simplistic. It's being able to have your idea, your schemas, and your language contain the core essence of an important and clear idea in a clear and compact way. So Schimmel reminds us that simple ideas have power. And here's an example that he gives that's a visual example of changing patterns in nitrogen flow in soil as nitrogen availability increases, as a kind of way to demonstrate that you can have complex ideas, but have this kind of very simple description so that people can see and understand what's happening. The element of the unexpected would be plucking what's unknown within the literature, mass of literature that is known to reveal the novel, something new and something important. This came up in the webinar as in the Q&A as a question about the reliability of the unexpected or surprising, and that the consistency of writing within a genre or within your field. That academic writing, you don't want people to be surprised much. This is not fiction. You don't want them to be seeing things, that are not true. And so I clarified that how we're talking about it here, the unexpected, is that it would be unexpected within the context of your discussion within the field, so that it's the kind of, we understand this and we understand that, but there's something else here that we need to understand. Therefore, we're doing this, or therefore there's this kind of new idea that has come about. That's oftentimes the unexpected. So it will be contextualized within your field for sure. And you might think about, what are some of those examples of the unexpected things that you found compelling? How are they structured, and what makes them kind of useful, right? That you're like, oh, this is new, this is interesting. How are they shaped? Take a look at those. Concrete, particularly if you're working in a field where ideas are perhaps abstracted out. Philosophy, I think of as one, literary studies in mine as well. It's really easy for us to talk about ideas in the abstract. As soon as you go to big ideas like environment, ecology, now uh, kind of contentious terms, climate change. These are huge abstracted terms that aren't grounded in the concrete. Some of, I think, what our challenges in our as researchers and scientists is that we have in experiencing the curse of knowledge, where we know what we're talking about when we say something like climate or environment, that not everyone else does know what we're talking about. So we need to make sure that we're clarifying even the simple terms that we take for granted for our audience. That'll be audience specific. So some people within the context will have access to the specialized language and how you're using certain terms. Although I would argue that big general kind of abstracted ideas that are not concrete would need to be made concrete regardless of your audience, and how you make it concrete would then determine who your audience is. Are you giving them detailed, specific information that an expert would understand to see it more concretely, or are you giving them figurative language and examples that are non-expert examples for them to be able to see something and have it be concrete? The credibility. This is where we ground our ideas in previous work, right? So that there's something that has come before and that we are building off of, and describing our own data and methods, that we present our conclusions by showing that they grow from credible data on our own, and that we build a chain, or in the past I used stairs, right, to describe this, but this chain that extends from past work to future directions. And a break anywhere in that chain makes the whole endeavor lose credibility. And here Schimmel's talking about the need for accuracy, precision, and our research ethics to make sure that we are giving folks something that's reproducible if we're doing experimental science, or something that is clearly connected and others can build off of if we're doing something that's interpretive or kind of analytical scholarship. Emotional connections, right? Thinking about what's curious or exciting about the work that you're doing. And he says you can engage, this is going back to Schimmel. He says you can engage emotion by shifting your focus from what information do I have to offer to what knowledge do I have to offer? What can they pick up, And phrase differently, what's my answer to what's my question? So you can help people guide them through that kind of behind the scenes that we were talking about earlier, where you can give them just a little bit of a picture behind the scenes on like, these are the questions we were asking, and this was what was guiding our experiments or our research and work. And then stories, this is a term that gets tossed around a lot these days in talking about what we do in research writing. In part, science communication picked up the idea of narrative and story and has run with it pretty intensively, but not all stories and narratives are scientific, right? So, and it kind of is also one of those kind of vacuous, almost abstracted terms where we have to clarify what do we really mean by story. And here it's, you can just discuss your data, your ideas, and find units that can package it into coherent modules so that readers then can assimilate each piece and more easily pick it up and see how it constructs and adds to a whole. That's how Schimmel's talking about stories. Right? So to tell if your writing is sticky, you can ask yourself, and this does not come from Schimmel, this is kind of another synthesis, but you can ask yourself if others can speak or say it in conversation, can they repeat it to others? Can they put it on a slide? Can they share what it is that you have shared with them? There are some great examples, I think, from Carol Dweck, from Merton, from Jolie Jensen, from their work that demonstrates stickiness. So Carol Dweck in Mindset, in the New Psychology of Success, in a growth mindset, she says, challenges are exciting rather than threatening. They're opportunities to grow. I just put it on a slide myself, right? Think about, or communal knowledge is fundamental to a fundamental norm of science, right? This kind of communal sharing of knowledge, right? That we need to share, or scholarly writing is a practice and not a performance, something that we're doing regularly and not just once in a lifetime kind of thing. So you can tell if your writing is sticky if you can grab it and then put it on a slide or somebody else can repeat it. That all requires a fair amount of macro and micro editing. It may be that you have, through inspiration, come up with something that is super catchy and you're like, this is where I'm starting from. Or maybe it's your title, or you've come up with something super catchy after months and months of hard work and trying to frame out your ideas for your readers. Um, it's just that catchy kind of sticky quality to a quotation or two that can be hard-won labor or it can just feel like it's inspiration. However, building out an entire manuscript, a proposal that is coherent, that tells a story that is readable, and that has moments in it that are pluckable, right? That overall it has a sticky quality so that people can retell others what it's about. It'll have those specific elements, some specific sentences like we just saw. But how do we edit and do that? Well, there's a macro quality to a document, a manuscript, a proposal, anything that you're writing, which is that kind of big picture. And then there's the micro level, which is the kind of word choice and sentence level. So you can think about the relationship between that macro and micro is there's a overall arching kind of sense to it, but then it's built out of sections that have then paragraphs that then are built out of sentences, which of course then are built out of words. This one, if we start to get too kind of deeply into this, we'll be pulling into and moving into the realm of composition and rhetoric, linguistics, and other writing studies focused fields. So we're going to keep it pretty general when we're talking about our macro, our sentence and word choice levels and paragraph levels, moving up into the macro to from the micro to the macro. But some of the ways that you could see very easily, I think, in how you might arrange your ideas and think about the connections between those sections and within sections is how you're arranging macro elements according to chronological, spatial, or thematic modes. And then at what point you might be deciding to use that. So if you're thinking about a chronological arrangement, which gives a sense of narration of storytelling, first, second, third, right, or next this happened, detailing out a process, giving examples or illustrations, or talking about something in terms of cause and effect, that could be easily identified and used in a method section, for example, if you're telling the course of a battle in history. So depending on what you're telling your readers, you may want to be arranging things in order of time or in order of space, what they see in the right corner or down below, or what's connected to a kind of a succession of linked objects or thematic arrangements. And that's an order that arises from the natural nature of the topic itself. This is perhaps the most vexing, if that's going to be the word, arrangement, in part because most everything that we write about in terms of our ideas in our fields is thematically arranged. Most arguments are thematically arranged. We don't arrange arguments according to chronology typically or spatially, for example. So classification, comparison, contrast, analogy, definitions, examples, illustrations, these are all kind of thematically arranged descriptions and information or um, analyses. And so when you're arranging your thematic elements, it's helpful for your readers if you typically start with what is familiar and go to what's unfamiliar, or from what's uncontested, what everybody agrees with, to what people don't agree with, to what is contested, from something simple to something complex, or from something general to something particular. And so these arrangements are not the only types of arrangements, but they're the most common. And they are typically, if you're going to be telling a story that's clear for your readers, you're going to be choosing selectively at the macro level, kind of how you want a section to be arranged. So maybe that in your introduction, you want something thematically arranged. Maybe in your literature review, you want to do some chronological arrangement if there's a series of building of ideas. Same thing then in your methodology. Then as you're laying out your descriptions and your findings, maybe you have a different type of arrangement, something that's perhaps more thematic, once again, that connects back to your pulls from the chronology that you've built out earlier. And then in your discussion and conclusion, you're building out something probably that is thematic, once again, but then alludes to the past, the present, and the future, to what it has become, what was done before, what you've currently done, and then where you might go in the future. So none of these macro arrangements are intended to be entirely one arrangement for a full manuscript, that you pick and choose those big picture arrangements of sentences and paragraphs and sections and as needed. And then the micro cues gives you a sense of your style and your own word choices and how it is that you would cue your readers and connect them to the next idea. We know a lot now about using AI for writing. We need to learn a lot more. It's not clear on the possibilities and full capabilities and the limitations of AI. It's also not clear for us at CSU exactly what the guidance is on how we're allowed in our research writing to use or not use AI systems exactly. My recommendation is to make sure that you are always following ethical principles for scientific and research writing, and that you know that that includes honesty and objectivity and transparency in any use of AI. We know that AI is best used by us when we are starting with something that we've already written and that we're working with it with AI. That poses some challenges for us doing original research, because we know that we cannot be using OpenAI systems by dumping in original research data, anything that could be protected by confidentiality or IRB constraints. And so we just want to make sure that when we're prompting, we're giving AI a small portion, nothing that could be risk our copyright later on. And excuse me, that we prompt it to give us something that helps us with our own style, not shifting our style to ChatGPTs or co-pilots. We should be using Copilot, by the way. I mentioned ChatGPT just because it's easy for us to talk about AI and ChatGPT. But if you are using AI in your research writing, right now we have Copilot at CSU. We'll have CSU ChatGPT or CSU GPT and RAM GPT soon. We have Scrib. So we have a couple IT approved AI platforms for us to be using, but others, you don't want to be, again, putting large amounts of your own writing into OpenAI for it to give you feedback, in part because it's not clear how much of that gets used elsewhere, and you are using your work then becomes a training for that model. So for prompts, you may find it helpful in using Copilot to just point out where this writing is unclear and use small sections. You could ask it to rewrite, but maintain your voice and improve the readability and flow, and just double check and make sure that that really is what you would say and how you would say it. You could say move 3 or more concise, or create 3 or more versions of this paragraph and keep it technically accurate, or highlight the sentences that could be clearer in framing statements. And I know we've worked with Copilot on an article looking at different styles and writing styles between co-authors to be able to determine how to make some revisions on that. If you're going to be using AI at your editing stages, then just make sure that you include it within a kind of ethical workflow. And first, check and make sure that AI use is allowed and how you're going to be using it. Make sure that you're not going awry of any IRB or kind of publication funder requirements. Double check and make sure that you have no original data or there's no conflict included in your prompts, meaning you're not revealing names of human subjects or breaking confidentiality requirements. 3, begin with your own writing. It's always important for you to start with your writing first. Don't ask ChatGPT what it thinks about your ideas before you've given it something to give you feedback on. Identify your editing goals clearly, as mentioned with the prompts before. Work in small chunks, again, so that you can be selective with what you're giving it. Remember that you are always the human in the loop, that anything that goes out that you've used AI in has to include a human review, your final review, or co-authors, and that you document all AI use, the programs, the prompts, the dates, and the URLs. So those steps look something like this. Define what AI programs you want to be using and the type of task that you want to include it and use it for. And if you're in something, like biomedical sciences or other sciences where you are already using different forms of machine learning for your data acquisition and processing, those you will be citing in your methods, but that's a little different than using Gen AI for recrafting portions of your writing. You want to track all of the programs, prompts, right, use states, and then verify your outputs, make sure that they're accurate, make sure that you have used them and understood the restrictions on how you can use them, and then disclose, either in your methods, in your acknowledgement statements, citations, right? The AID statement there comes from Kari Weaver, and there's a sample on our CSU LibGuide for AI and research. So if you need to look at possible AID statements, artificial intelligent disclosure statements, then go to see that on our CSU LibGuides. And just last, kind of just remember and then insert whatever you are for me. As a writing study scholar, I am a professional writer. A little less clear and catchy as a scientist, you are a professional writer, but just as you know. So my recommendation to you in the end is ultimately write on and with style. Thank you for being here, and take what works for you, explore, play around, share with exuberance. When you do, give some shout out and credit to CSU Writes. We appreciate that. And until we meet again, may your writing be brief, frequent, low stress, and highly rewarding.